So joining us now to discuss it all is Professor Richard Wolff, host of Economic Update, and Peter Schiff, chief economist at Euro-Pacific Capital. It's great to have you both on the show today. Professor Wolff, let's start with you. What do you make of the current political divide as the average American is being forced to pay more for just about everything they already couldn't afford, while the richest companies in the country are profiting more than ever?
Well, it's an amazing thing to do to the American people. Put you through 3 crashes in the first 21 years of this century, put you through the worst public health disaster probably in American history, but at least in the last century. You come struggling through that with all the pain and all the suffering that so many of us have gone through, and then you hit us just as we thought maybe we were coming out of it. You hit us with an inflation in which the prices are rising faster than the wages. This was already a problem. This will drive people into even more debt if you're able, in fact, to run it up a bit more. So it's an economic disaster. It's a sign of an economic system, to be blunt, that really isn't working very well, and that now Mr. Biden, who happens to be the president, stuck with the inflation that, look, has been coming down the pike for quite a while now, given the amount of money being printed relative to the amount of goods and services not being available for sale. He has to react to the inflation, but if he dares to raise interest rates, which is what some are suggesting, well, then the debt that is higher than ever in this country is going to become an unbearable burden. This is a system that is rapidly reaching multiple dead ends.
And Peter, what's your take on all of this? I mean, we've watched officials claim inflation was transitory for months, and now, of course, the Biden administration is continuing with this business as usual with the renomination of Jay Powell. How does that play into this divide?
Well, I actually agree with the professor. I don't think that the current socialist economic system works. Central government planning, manipulation of interest rates, the constant creation of inflation. Inflation is not new. That's how the government has been bailing out the markets from the crises it created with its subsidies and artificially low interest rates. So now the inflation is moving from financial assets into real goods in a way that government statistics can no longer hide, because the actual rate that prices are rising is probably twice what the government admits. And this is not a transitory situation. This is the tip of an inflationary iceberg. And what we need to do is abandon this system we have now and go back to free market capitalism, laissez-faire, sound money. That is the only path back to prosperity.
And Professor Wolff, I want your response to that, because, I mean, Peter kind of started that comment out by calling basically the Biden administration's agenda a socialist agenda. And you, as somebody who's written extensively about socialism, I would say you would strongly disagree that Biden's policies are a socialist agenda, and he more is in line with what would be free market capitalism, correct?
Certainly by putting Mr. Powell back in there. Mr. Powell has been an enthusiastic supporter of the capitalist system, a very vocal opponent of the socialism. One could argue whether he understands what it is he's against, but nonetheless, he's clearly against it. There's absolutely nothing in Mr. Biden's portfolio that has anything to do with socialism. He's proud of having been the senator from Delaware, which is the home of most of our large corporations because they're so favorable. But I don't want to get into a debate about what the words mean. I think the important thing is that if they were to go backwards, and I agree with Peter Schiff, what he's proposing is that we go backwards, which is a position I wouldn't be so eager to support, to be as polite as I know how. I want to go forward. I want to ask and answer the question, what are the real causes of being in this dead end? I know it's fashionable to blame the government, But you know, I look at the American government and I see something that's a creature of the private capitalist system and always has been. That creature doesn't do his job real well. That in fact the government can sometimes make it worse than what it was. Doesn't change the basic relationship, which is the people with the money control the government, and they have in the history of this country, and they are at least as responsible for the dead end as anything the government ever did.
If Biden were a capitalist, he would be advocating for less government, not more. He would want to cut government spending, not dramatically increase it. And Powell is not part of capitalism. He is the antithesis. This is central government planning. This is price fixing of interest rates. The Federal Reserve has nothing to do with capitalism. Under a capitalistic system, the market would set interest rates, not the Federal Reserve. And under capitalism, we would have sound money, not the fiat money that's manufactured by the Federal Reserve. So your problems are not with capitalism. They're with these socialist institutions that are creatures of government.
Professor Wolff,
yeah.
Go ahead and respond to that.
Well, you know, it used to be a private capitalist economy early on. And because it had so many problems it couldn't solve, it created the very institutions you now want to see as having dropped from the sky. They didn't. They created the Federal Reserve back at the beginning of the 20th century because the monetary system of this country produced a panic every 15 minutes that couldn't be coped with. These institutions you call socialist. Look, wait a minute. Let me just finish the point. It's like every corporation. When you go,
it's the socialists that destroy economies.
Peter, let Professor Wolff finish, and then we'll get right back to your response here.
Right. Well, you know, this is an old conversation. Let me summarize it by the following. Over the last 30 years, the most rapidly growing economy in the world is the People's Republic of China. The United States doesn't come close. They grow their average GDP 6 to 9% a year. We do 2 to 3%. There's no question that they are a socialist economy. They call themselves that. We call them that. They're able to grow way better than the United States is. And you have to face these realities rather than redefining your language to kind of try to get out of the uncomfortable position that these realities represent. The problems of American capitalism are not due only to the government. This demonization of the government relieves corporations from all their responsibility, as if all the mistakes and all the failures come from the government.
Peter?
Professor, communism failed in China. That's why they abandoned it. Yes, it's still a communist party, but there's actually more free market capitalism happening in China than there is in the United States. That is the problem. It's when they went away from communism and embraced private property and profit and unleashed entrepreneurship. It's private capitalism that is thriving in China despite the communist government. What we need is more capitalism here in America. The problem is we're moving more in the direction of the policies that the Chinese abandoned.
Professor Wolff, I have 30 more seconds for you in this segment here.
The Chinese didn't abandon anything. The Chinese continue to control their economy. They have a huge public sector, much larger than anything in the United States. No prospect of that going away. And in the last 5 years, when they've had more private capitalism, their economic growth has slowed down. So the logic of your argument doesn't hold and hasn't done so for quite a while. You ought to go back and check.
All right, I'm going to have to jump in here really quick. We're going to continue this conversation on the other side of the break. Professor Richard Wolff and Peter Schiff, thank you both for your time.